Hello again. In this episode, we are going to address the question, what is required minimum distribution? You know, when I talk about this topic, sometimes I go crazy because I will tune into stations like CNBC, and the advisors there will always preach, oh yeah, if you don't need the money out of your IRA or 401k after age 70 and a half, just take RMDs, required minimum distributions. And I go, oh, that is the worst advice I've ever heard. In this episode, you're going to learn why and why CNBC tells people to do that. And so stay with me and you're going to understand what it is and how to do actually the opposite. So when people ask me, well, Doug, why does CNBC tell you to do that? Aren't they the gurus? I'm going, who is funding CNBC? Tax revenuers. Why would you want to discourage somebody from taking out a minimum distribution? The government has been waiting for this tax revenue your entire working career, and they've been planning on that. Do you know the federal government actually plans their budgets based upon how many people will be retiring? And at those ages, especially age 70 and a half, how many people will be retiring that year and how much money they have socked away in yet to be taxed IRAs and 401ks. When I start showing people the tax impact of deferring and putting off tax, postponing, procrastinating, it's sort of like this couple here, and it says that is not what we thought it was. They thought this 401k or IRA was this nice little kitty cat, and they realized, wow, this thing maybe stinks. I'm not in a lower bracket when I retired. This is not the cat's meow that we thought it was. So what is the solution? See, when people defer, many times when couples or individuals do quite well and they don't need the money, they've been deferring. Now, you probably are aware that when you put money in a qualified plan like an IRA or 401k, then you have some pros, but you also have some cons. You put it in there because it will accumulate tax deferred. You're getting a tax break on the seed money, the money you put in, but you agree that you'll pay tax on the back end, except you can't believe how many people I ask, and they didn't even think about the taxes on the back end. They thought, well, it's tax free. No, it isn't. It's only tax deferred. Well, they think they're going to be in a lower bracket when they retire, and they're not because they've been killing their deductions along the way. They have been paying off their house and their kids are gone, and they're not contributing money in retirement to IRAs or 401ks. And so you lose all those deductions. If you're a business owner, you lose those deductions. And so then people find themselves in this shocking surprise where they're paying as much or more in tax than they ever paid during their working years, even if they have less income, because their deductions are all gone. They were going down the highway with one foot on the gas pedal, but the other foot was on the brake pedal. So these cons versus the pros on these qualified plans, the government realizes, well, if you put money into an IRA or 401k and you touch it before age 59 and a half, what happens? 10% penalty. You can only put in a certain dollar amount, a certain percent of your income. See, these are the strings attached. But see, if you have your money in there after age 59 and a half, you can access it without a 10% penalty, which many times I tell people, start accessing it. Get it rolled out 5 years before you retire. Start the process so you get it out, the tax is over and done with, which you're going to learn why that is a better strategy instead of RMDs. But if you don't, they say, oh, defer until you're 70 and a half. If you hit the age of 70 and a half, and you don't withdraw what the government says you're supposed to, there's a penalty. Do you know how much that penalty is? 50%. See, the government wants that money out in tax before you die so they can tax it again when you do die. If you're supposed to pull out $50,000 and you don't, the penalty is $25,000. It's 50% of what you should have pulled out. So in these series of episodes, you're going to understand how they compute that. But over here, The pros are you get tax deductible funding, tax deferred growth, and maybe you put in $1 and your employer matches 50 cents on the dollar and you think, oh, I got a 50% rate of return. No, you didn't. You started out with 50% more, which is nice, but when you pull out, if you put in $1 and you get matched 50 cents, you got $1.50. You pull out the $1.50 and you owe that 50 cents that was matched to the government in tax. So that's nice. Your employer is covering your future tax liability because you owe a third of not only what you put in, but a third of everything it grows to. So what are the cons? When you take it out, it's fully taxed as you use that money. You must use it up. That's the RMD. If you don't withdraw it based upon the government's formula, based on your life expectancy, it's a 50% penalty because they're counting on that tax revenue. And if you bugger up their projection, then that makes them mad and they will penalize you. They want that money. And the remainder that is left behind is potentially taxed twice if you have income tax to who you leave it to in a stretch IRA or 401k. And also an estate tax at any given time. Our country has had an estate tax. It could be taxed twice upon passing, especially to non-spousal heirs, your children, grandchildren, and so forth. And so that's why we want to look at things from a required minimum or maybe a required maximum. Let's get the taxes over and done with sooner than later. Here's why. So in some additional episodes, I will actually go in and show you what a required minimum distribution is, the amount, how it's calculated. You might want to download the IRS publication 590 to follow with me to see what I'm talking about. But the whole point of an RMD is it's for the government. They are planning on that tax revenue. They've had a permanent tax lien on your IRAs and 401ks, and they want their money and they plan on it in their budget. Now, what happens is whenever I ask audiences, what do you think? Do you think future taxes are going to be lower? No. Do you think they're going to be the same? There's a few people, but when I ask, do you think they're going to be higher? How many? Raise your hand, and a sea of hands goes up. If that is true, why do we get duped into putting money into tax deferred accounts, growing our money to some perceived unknown advantage, and then withdraw our money when we're all convinced taxes are going to be higher? That doesn't make sense. Well, see, if we get caught up in, well, if you don't need the money, just take out the minimum. You know, years ago, I developed what I think is still the only software on the planet that shows people the darkness of the night if they keep deferring and taking out the required minimum distributions through their life expectancy, their spouse's life expectancy, and then at the end of the day it transfers. They're flabbergasted when they see that at a retirement, if they had $500,000, they will owe $500,000 in tax. They go, wait a minute, I'm going to pay as much in tax as I now have accumulated by age 65? Yep. If you go the RMD route, they're going to keep having a lien on your account. It's the best partner, the best savings bond the government ever came up with for themselves. And so instead of doing that, I would recommend you consider, what if we got the money out faster? Get the taxes over and done with in maybe 5 years, maybe from age 60 to 65, and be all done and reposition the net after tax money into something that's going to be tax-free from now on, like my favorite tax-free investment, the laser fund that I explain in other episodes. And at the end of the day, when I ultimately die, it blossoms and transfers tax-free, reimburses all the taxes I paid. Nothing else does that. That is called a strategic rollout. And in this episode series, I'm going to show you how you want to take advantage of that. And sometimes you can offset some or all of the tax with new deductions that you might resurrect. I've had people come to me for years. I remember this sweet little couple, both were school teachers, and they had $250,000 saved in their 401ks and 403bs and tax sheltered annuities. When they saw they were going to pay $250,000 in tax if they strung it out, based upon what their advisor said, oh, just take the required minimum, they were shocked. I was able to get the money out over a 5-year period. Taxes over and done with. We took the tax liability from $250,000 down to $60,000. Then we took it down to $20,000 by resurrecting deductions, and finally we took it down to zero. 5 years later, they came in and they were so grateful that they were able to get the money out and the taxes over and done with. We tripled their net spendable retirement income. We had a nest egg in their family bank, is what I call it, that allowed them to take their kids and grandkids on cruises and vacations, retreats with a purpose that they would have never had been able to do had they left their money in a tax-deferred IRA or 401k. This is significant. It's how to redirect otherwise payable taxes to causes you support. Don't buy into taking the minimum. In their case, we took the maximum over a 5-year period, and by doing the opposite of what CNBC is telling you to do, they came out way ahead, and they actually helped us out this great country far greater than just rolling over and paying a bunch of unnecessary tax the rest of their lives. Because of this, I have written many books and taught many courses about how to do strategic rollouts. And frankly, in my most recent book, I have 62 stories. There are some critical ones in here of how we've taken people from the highest tax bracket in 5 years to a 0% tax bracket. I don't know if I can do that for you, but I can dramatically lessen the amount of tax you will pay the rest of your life. And the key is sometimes hard to swallow because people naturally say, oh, I don't want to pay the tax. Just like the 2 school teachers, I felt like Sam I Am in Green Eggs and Ham. You will like this, you will see. Oh no, we don't want to pay any tax. Well, after 5 years, they were saying, thank you, Sam I Am. We like these green eggs and ham because they bit the bullet, they got the taxes over and done with, repositioned their money into a tax-free portfolio from that point forward, a portfolio of laser funds, which is what this book is about, the laser fund. These are charts and graphs on this side of the book. These are for the left brain people who want all the numbers and charts and analytical stuff. If you learn by stories, you flip it over, and there's one chapter in here on strategic rollouts that give you several examples of how people like you have been able to get the taxes over and done with. And instead of taking the required minimum distribution, nope. They almost took the maximum over a 5-year period, and they were tax-free. They were in a very low or 0% tax bracket the rest of their life. Would you like that? Click down here and get a copy of this book absolutely free. You can read the left brain and the right brain side. You pay like $5.95 shipping and handling. And if you want to go on a deep dive, I invite you to explore the concepts here even further.